Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of all my colleagues in the African and Middle Eastern Division, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. I'm Joan Weeks. I'm the Assistant Chief of the Division, and we are very pleased to present this program in celebration of the 2018 Kane Prize winner, Makena Onjerika, who will read from her prize-winning short story, Fanta Blackcurrant, followed by a moderated discussion. And however, before we start today's program and introduce our speaker, I'd just like to give you a brief overview of our division and its resources in the hopes that you'll come back and use our collections. Ahmed, as we call it, is a custodial division, which is comprised of 3 sections that build and serve the collections to researchers from around the world. We cover over 78 countries and 33 languages. The Africa section was formally established in the Library of Congress in 1960 and includes countries in all of sub-Saharan Africa. The section continues to advise and collaborate in the library's acquisitions program through the Nairobi Overseas Office. It provides reference and bibliographic services and maintains liaison with other research and teaching institutions in the United States and abroad. The Hebraic section is responsible for Judaica and Hebraica worldwide. And the Near East section covers all of the Arab countries, including North Africa, the Middle East. And then we cover Turkey, Central Asia, Iran, Afghanistan, Armenia, and Georgia. So if you're interested in research in any of those areas, you would come into our reading rooms in the Jefferson Building. Now I'd like to invite Ambassador Bridgewater, who's representing the Africa Society today, and also is the sponsor of the African Poets and Writers series that we're celebrating today. So Ambassador Bridgewater, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be with you today to represent the Africa Society. We are so pleased to be partnering for several years now with the Library of Congress, with the African and Middle Eastern Division, for the Conversations with African Poets and Writers. The Africa Society believes it is essential to educate and advocate for Africa. And what better way to do this than through listening to the literature and the writings of African writers and poets. And we have a distinguished individual today that we're so pleased to have. She's the 2018 Kane Prize winner, and we are so pleased that she will be sharing and informing us about Africa through her very important work. We think that it is just so key to be able to understand about cultures and people through the writings of those who know it best. And of course, our winner here today, Miss Makena Onjerika, is just a wonderful example of many that we have partnered with over the years. We would like to also inform you that the Africa Society has an important Teach Africa program with young people, which we feel is so important in helping them to understand and to demystify the continent. So the Conversations with African Poets and Writers is very important in our portfolio, and we are delighted to be with you today. I now invite the head of the Literature and Poetry Center, Dr. Casper, to come to the podium. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ambassador Bridgewater, and much thanks to the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa and the African and Middle Eastern Division at the Library of Congress, as well as the Center for African Studies at Howard University. It has been an honor to work with all of our partners on this series. Also, I want to give a special thanks to Mary Jane Deeb, who was until recently the longtime chief of the African and Middle Eastern Division. Mary Jane's vision and commitment made this series possible. This particular program is also possible thanks to the Lannan Center for Poetics and Social Practice and the Department of English at Georgetown University, as well as the Kane Prize staff, and I would like to thank all. Before we begin, let me ask you to turn off your cell phones and any other electronic devices you have that might interfere with our event. Second, please note that this program is being recorded for webcast, and by participating in the Q&A section, you give us permission for future use of the recording. Before I talk about today's speaker, let me tell you a little bit about the Poetry and Literature Center. We are home to the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, who will be giving her final event on April 15th, not very far from now. And we put on 20 to 30 public programs like this one each year. To find out more about the series and our other programs, you can visit our website, www.loc.gov/poetry. You can also find out more about the library's African and Middle Eastern division and view webcasts in our Conversation with African Poets and Writers series at www.loc.gov/rr/Ahmed. The Library of Congress has been hosting the Keene Prize winner since 2014, when we welcomed 2013 winner Tope Folarin. We are excited to extend the same welcome to Kenyan writer Makena Onjerika, the 2018 winner, for her story, Fanta Blackcurrant. Dina Majestu, the chair of the 2008 prize jury, praised the story in his remarks, saying, quote, "The winner of this year's Keene Prize is as fierce as they come. A narrative forged but not defined by the streets of Nairobi. A story that stands out as more than just witness." Makena Onjerika's Fanta Blackcurrant presides over a grammar and architecture of its own making, one that eschews any trace of sentimentality in favor of a narrative that is haunting in its humor, sorrow, and intimacy, end quote. Onjerika is a graduate of the MFA Creative Writing program at New York University and has been published in Urban, Confucians, and Wasifiri. She lives in Nairobi, Kenya, and is currently working on a fantasy novel. We're delighted to have her here to read from her story, and as Joan said, to be followed by a moderated discussion with Ahmed specialist Eve Ferguson. And we'll have time at the end of the event for your questions as well. We'll have a mic to pass around to you, so we can make sure we record you for the webcast. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Makena Onjerika.
Thank you everyone for coming, so many of you, and thank you for inviting me here as well. So I'll be reading from my story, and I think we have enough time for me to actually go through all of it, which is awesome. And here goes. She was our sister and our friend, but from the time we were totos, Mary was not like us. If the Good Samaritans who came to give us foods and clothes on Sundays asked us what we wanted from God, some of us said going to school, some of us said enough money for living in a room in Mathare slums, and some of us, the ones who wanted to be seen they were born again, said going to heaven. But Mary, she only wanted a big Fanta Blackcurrant for her to drink every day, and it never finish. God was always liking Mary. In the streets, when we opened our hands and prayed people for money, they felt more mercy for Mary. They looked how she was beautiful, with a brown Muzungu face and a space in front of her teeth. They asked Mary, "Where is your father? And where is your mother?" They gave her 10 bob and sometimes even 20 bob. For us who were color black, just 5 bob. All of us felt jealousy for Mary, like a hot potato refusing to be swallowed. We thieved things from her nylon paper, only small things. Her bread, her razor blade, her tin for cooking. But some of us felt more jealousy for Mary, and we wished bad things to fall on her head. And then, one day, Mary was put on the TV. It happened like this. A boy called Wanogo was killed by a police. This Wanogo, he was not one of our brother. He was not our brother or our friend. But some boys came to the mjengo where we were staying, carrying sticks and stones. They said all chokoras, boys and girls, must go to the streets to make noise about Wanogo. Fearing them, we went and shouted, "Killers, killers, even chokoras are people," until TV people came to look our faces with their cameras. All of us wanted to be put in the TV. Quickly, quickly, we beat dust out of our clothes. We stopped smiling loudly to hide our black teeth. We pulled mucus back into our noses. All of us told the story of Wanogo, how he was killed with a gun called AK-47, when he was just sitting there at Jivanji Gardens, breathing glue and hearing the lunchtime preacher say how heaven is beautiful. He was not even thinking which car he could steal the eyes or mirrors or tires. All of us told the story. But at night, when we went to the Muhindi shops to look ourselves in the TVs being sold in the windows, we only saw Mary. She was singing English. Mary had a retro ramp, retro ramp, retro ramp. Some of us looked Mary with big eyes because we had not heard that before she came to the streets, she had been taken to school from standard 1 to 3. We said, "Mary, speak English, even as we hear." We beat her some slaps. We laughed, but inside all of us started fearing that someone was coming to save Mary from the streets. All of us remembered how last year people came to save a dog because it found a turtle thrown away in the garbage. We felt jealousy for Mary. She was never thinking anything in her head. Even if she was our sister and our friend, she was useless, all the time breathing glue and thinking where she could find a Fanta blackcurrant. If anyone came to save Mary, all of us were going to say we were Mary. Some of us started washing Nairobi River every day to stop smelling chokora. Some of us went to the Muhindi shops every day to listen how people speak English on the TVs. Some of us started telling long stories about how long ago, even us, we had lived in a big house. But no one came to save Mary. Days followed days and years followed years. We finished being Toto, and blood started coming out between our legs. And Mary, from staying in the sun every day, she changed from color brown to color black, just like us. Jiggers entered her toes. Her teeth came out, leaving 10 spaces in her mouth. Breathing glue, she forgot her father's name and her mother's name. Every day her head went bad. She removed her clothes and washed herself with soil until we chased her. We caught her. We sat on her. We pinched her. We beat her slaps. We pulled her hair. We didn't stop until tears came out of her eyes. All of us were now big mamas. When we prayed people for money in the streets, they looked how we had big matiti hanging on our chests like ripe mangoes. We felt shame because they were seeing we were useless. In the end, all of us stopped praying people in the streets. Even Mary, she followed us at night when we went to see the watchman at the bank. He said, "Me, I'm only helping you because I feel mercy for you." He said, "You only pay me 10 bob and remain with 10 bob." He said, "I will give you good customers." He said he was our friend, but when we asked him how to remove the turtle inside Mary's stomach, he chased us away, calling us devils. He said, "Who told you I know how to kill turtles?" All of us felt mercy for Mary. Maybe one time after a customer finished, she had forgotten to wash herself down there with salt water. Some of us said we knew a way to remove the turtle using wires. Some of us knew a way using leaves from a tree in Jivanji Garden. Some of us started crying, fearing even us we had a turtle inside. But Mary, she was just breathing glue and singing a song to herself. In the mjengo where we were staying, with 2 walls and one side of the roof removed, she sat the whole day under the stairs going nowhere, telling us which man had put the turtle inside her stomach. First, it was a man walking with a stick who gave her a new 100 bob. And then she said it was a mzungu talking English through his nose. And then she scratched the jiggers in her toes and the lice in her hair and said no. It was the man who took her in a new car to a big house and washed her body and applied her nice-smelling oil, asking her, does she see how she can be beautiful? We asked ourselves if she was thinking to find that man, if she was thinking he was going to marry her and take her to live in that big house, eating breads and drinking milks. All of us pulled air through our teeth to make long sounds at her because she was thinking like a broken egg. But some of us, looking how Mary was happy, we gave her presents, soap remaining enough for washing 3 times, a comb broken 3 teeth, a mango still color green. We wanted that when the turtle came out, she could not refuse for us to carry it and touch it on the stomach to make it laugh. Some of us started telling her which name was best for the turtle. We wished it to be a girl, even if boys are better, because boys can search inside garbage for tins, papers and bottles, and take them to a place in Westlands to be paid some money. But girls are beautiful, and you can plait their hairs and wear them clothes of many colors. All of us thought like this, but all of us could see the troubles coming to fall on Mary's head. We prayed the watchman for her again, but he said, no, no, no. Customers don't want someone with a turtle inside her stomach. We had helped her the most, could not share our monies with Mary. She started standing outside a supermarket, following the people coming out with nylon papers full of things for their turtles, milks, breads, and sugars. She opened her hand for them, saying, Saidia maskini. Some of the people threw saliva on the ground, thinking Mary was wanting to touch them. But God was always liking Mary. Looking how she was wearing a mother dress with holes and no shoes, good Samaritans felt mercy for her. Before lunch, she was given 40 or 50 bob. But outside that supermarket, there were also beggars sitting on the ground, showing people their broken legs and their blind eyes. They felt jealousy for Mary. When people were not looking, they stood up and chased Mary away, beating her. From there, Mary went to open her hand for people sitting in traffic jam at the roundabout near Globe Cinema. She showed them crying eyes, saying, Mama, saidia maskini. But they did not feel mercy. They closed their windows and looked her from the other side, thinking she wanted to run away with their Nokias like a Chokora boys. And sometimes cars came very fast, almost knocking her, and then heads came out of the windows and shouted, Kasia, get out of the road or I'll step you. Breathing glue, Mary did not feel bad in her heart. But that area was for beggar mamas and their turtles. These beggar mamas, every day their work was looking the people passing and telling their turtles which people to follow and pray for money. When these mamas saw Mary being given a 10 bob, they caught her and beat her some slap, saying even them they needed to put food in their mouths. We said, Mary, stop fearing those women. We said, Mary, Nairobi is not theirs. We said, Mary, in the streets, it's a must to survive. But all of us knew Mary was not Doggy, who if you tried to take her things, she could eat your fingers. Mary could not kick a Chokora boy like Kung Fu between his legs when he came looking for her at night. All of us felt mercy for Mary, but we had helped her the most. She stayed sleeping on her sacks for 2 days, and then her food finished. She put her things inside a nylon paper and tied them with a shuka on her back like a turtle. She didn't say where she was going. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, we did not think about Mary. Sleeping on our sacks, washing our faces at night and applying powders, waiting in the street for customers to stop their cars and say kss for us to come quickly. Counting our monies and looking at the presents we had been given, plastic bangles, a box remaining 2 biscuits, a watch with the glass broken. All that time, we were thinking our own things. Some of us are thinking if we had jiggers in our toes. Some of us were thinking how we would be if our mothers and fathers had not died in mall or clashes. All of us breathed glue and counted on our fingers the days remaining until we finished being chokoras. 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, and then we started fearing for Mary. We asked ourselves, what if Chokora boys had found her staying alone? What if City Council had caught her and thrown her inside a lorry to be taken to the police station? Some of us, who had never been inside a police station, closed their eyes and ears when we told them our stories of being put in a cell with cockroaches and rats and big people criminals and 1 bucket for doing toilet in front of everyone. They asked us, how did you come out of the police station? We told them the story. We said, those police, they don't even give you 10 bob, not like customers. And then Mary came back. She was wearing a dress we had never seen, and on top a bigger sweater that was hiding her stomach. She had washed with soap and clean water. We could see her nylon paper was not full the same way it had been when she went away. We saw she was not just carrying the normal things for surviving in the streets: plastic kasuku for keeping food given by good Samaritans, bottles for fetching water, paper and sticks for starting fire, clothes for catching blood, salt and tins for cooking. She was not just carrying things collected in the streets like shoes and slippers not matching each other, one earring, a cup broken the handle, a paper written interesting things. Long ago, she had lost the things she brought when she came to the streets: her mother's Rosario, the knife that killed her father, a song her brother sang for her. We only wanted to see inside her nylon paper. We did not do something bad, just seeing. Even her she had seen inside our nylon papers many times before, but now she was sitting alone under the stairs going nowhere, singing to her stomach. La lam toto la lam. Some of us said her head had gone bad. Some of us said she was selfish. The way she was holding her nylon paper, we asked ourselves, was she thinking we wanted to thief her things? Even as we had our things, our monies, our food, when she went to toilet, we went quickly and looked inside her nylon paper and said, wow, wow. Mary was carrying 3 breads, 4 milks, and 2 sugars. She was carrying sweets tied in a handkerchief, and cabbage and rice. We could smell the chicken and chips she had not shared with her. In the bottom, she had 2 soaps and a plastic flower for putting in her hair, and 3 Fanta blackcurrants, remaining only the bottles. We did not do something bad, but she shouted at us, "Thieves! Thieves!" She removed the breads from our mouths and put everything back in our nylon paper. Remembering the way we helped her, we wanted to beat her slaps, to pull her hair, and to bite her, wanted to pinch her and put soil in her mouth. But because of the torture in her stomach, some of us felt bad in our hearts. We went to say sorry to Mary and sit with her under the stairs going nowhere. We said, "Mary, we're not going to tell anyone." We said, "Mary, do you remember who shared with you her toothbrush?" But Mary refused to tell us her story. At night when we went to see the watchman, Mary was left sleeping in our mjengo, not even fearing Chokora boys could find her alone. In the morning when we came back, she was not there, and when she came back, she was carrying more things. All of us knew Mary was thieving somewhere. Days followed days, and then a week, and then Mary was caught. It was January, and the sun was smiling loudly in the middle of the sky. The wind was chasing nylon papers and going under office women's skirts. Makanga was shouting for people to enter their matatus and be taken to Kahawa, Kangemi, and other places. People were refusing to enter the matatus because the fare was 40 bob instead of 20 bob. Some of us were sleeping and feeling we were dying. Some of us were starting fires to cook our food. Some of us were jumping rope and remembering the days we were tortoise. Some of us, breathing glue, were seeing dreams of eating chips and chicken. We had Mary running, and then she passed under the mabati fence surrounding our mjengo. All of us saw she was not carrying her nylon paper, and then 4 men entered behind her. There was a tall man, a short man, a man wearing a red shirt, and the leader carrying a big stick. They did not say to us anything. They went where Mary was hiding under the stairs going nowhere, and covered her mouth for her not to scream. Some of us breathed glue and looked far away. Some of us closed our ears and covered ourselves under our blankets. Now we knew where Mary was thieving. From office women wearing nice clothes that shaped them a figure 8. She was following them behind, slowly, looking everywhere in the streets if there were any police or city council. Office women do not walk fast, wearing those sharp shoes and looking themselves in all the windows of shops. At the place for crossing the road, they stop because they do not want to be splashed dirty water by cars and matatus. This is the time Mary went quickly, and opened her hand and said, "Saidia maskini." If the office woman gave her some money, Mary did not do anything, but if the woman said something bad to her, calling her malaya or asking her what she was thinking when she opened her legs, Mary removed a nylon paper she was hiding. Sorry. Let me do that again. If the office woman gave her some money, Mary did not do anything. But if the woman said something bad to her, calling her malaya or asking her what she was thinking when she opened her legs, Mary removed a nylon paper she was hiding under her sweater. Every day Mary was carrying under her sweater what she toileted in the morning. In a small voice, she told the office woman to give her money or be applied toilet and go back to the office smelling badly. And because office women fear toilet, they gave her 10 bob, or even they gave her 100 bob, or even 200 bob. And then Mary was very clever. She did not run away. Before the office woman shouted she was a thief, Mary started talking to herself and falling down and applying toilet on her face until people started thinking she was a mad woman. God was liking Mary, but she did not know that area was the area of big criminal thieves. They felt jealous how Mary was thieving cleverly. 4 big criminal thieves came to Onjerika to beat her with a big stick. They kicked her with their big shoes, pom, 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 like a sack of beans being removed their dry skins. They cut her new dress and her sweater. Blood came out from her head, her neck, her hands, and between her legs. They did not feel mercy for Mary. All of us wanted to help Mary. All of us were hearing the screams inside her covered mouth. All of us wanted to run and call the people in the streets, the police, the city council. But all of us were thinking, if the big criminal thieves did not feel mercy for Mary with her big swollen stomach, how much would they feel mercy for us? Days followed days, and Mary was sleeping on her sack, not moving or talking to us. We brought for her water. We put food in our mouths to chew and put in her mouth soft. Even if her head was an empty egg, she was our sister and our friend. We removed her dress and her sweater and washed them in Nairobi River. We poured soil where blood had come out of her body. We put her dead toto in a nylon paper and threw it in a garbage far away. Tears came out of our eyes for Mary. Some of us said in a small voice, Mary was dying. They said we go find another mjengo where to live, far away from Mary. We beat them slaps. We pulled their hair. We put soil in their mouth. Mary was our sister and our friend. We said, Mary, it is better like this. You will see. We said, Mary, now the watchman can find customers for you again. We said, Mary, this is the life of Chokora. But Mary was not hearing. Days followed days, and every day she was talking to herself. And then one day she put all her things in a nylon paper and tied it to her back with a shuka, like a toto. She passed us, and the mabati fence surrounding our mjengo. She closed her eyes a little because the sun was jumping everywhere, on the windows of cars, on the heads of passing people, on the roads shining black. She passed matatus blowing their horns and splashing mud water on people. She passed hawkers running away from city council. She passed watchmen outside banks and offices. She passed chokora boys climbing on garbage to find tins, papers and bottles for selling in Westlands. She passed streetlights looking down with yellow and black eyes. She passed a man being thieved, his shoes, his pockets, his clothes, everywhere. We followed her, asking her many times, Mary, where are you going? Mary, where are you going? Days followed days, and then years followed years. Some of us were caught by police and city council. We were taken to the police station, and from there to the judge, who looked at us through the mirrors in front of his eyes to see if we were good or bad. He beat his table with a wooden hammer and sent some of us to Langata to stay with big women criminals, and some of us to a school to cut grasses. Some of us were killed by police with a gun called AK-47. Some of us were killed by people we do not know. Some of us decided to become wives of chokora boys. Some of us, after many years, we had enough money for living in a room in Mathare slums, and we started finding customers for ourselves. And some of us, because of breathing too much glue, our heads went bad and we started removing our clothes and chasing people in Nairobi. But Mary, she closed Nairobi River, and then we do not know where she went. The end.
Is your mic on? Yes. Thank you very much. I'm glad we were able to hear the whole story. I think it was important to get to the end. I'm going to start with a few general questions that we ask all of our poets and writers, and then we'll get to some specifics. So tell me, when did you start writing, and what were some of your earliest ventures?
So I started writing when I was 15, and this happened because I finished reading Duology by Anthony Hope. You probably have read it. The first one is, it has something to do with Ruritania, Fantastical Place. And I got really annoyed at that book because the very handsome prince died. And so I decided I'm going to write my own novel. So my first work was actually a full-length fantasy novel that my mom was very generous and kind, and she self-published it, which is how I got then connected with all sorts of writers in Kenya, and sort of got into the Kane Prize circuit then by attending a Kane Prize Writers Retreat, and from there, just everything just stumbled on. Yeah.
Okay. What or who are the major influences on your work?
So there's several people. I do love my Indian writers a lot. So Amit Choudhury is a favorite. He writes quite some amazing stuff. And then Juno Diaz, of course, because his voice just feels very familiar, and it's been a wonderful guide for me in my own writing. I do enjoy Bruno Scholz, Polish writer. He writes the most fantastical kind, just overblown language, and it's quite wonderful. And then there's also the fantasy side of my writing. So I write two different kinds of things. My short fiction is usually realist and interested in playing in language, and then I have my longer work that is actually fantasy. So my fantastical influences are people like Adrian Tchaikovsky, N.K. Jemisin, and I just discovered a new writer that I really love, S.A. Chakraborty. So a lot of all these writers were sort of writing, I'd call it literary fantasy, actually.
Okay. So you kind of answered the first part of my question about writing fiction as a creative outlet. But let me ask you about your upcoming novel and the genre that's now getting very popular of Afrofuturism. Does your new work fall within that genre? Is that something that you're looking towards in your writing career?
It's a bit interesting to me, but I would say that my work or Afrofuturism to me sounds a bit more focused on science fiction and sort of imagining futures for Africa. I think I'm much more interested in using sort of all these ideas that I grew up with and influences from, African mythology in as part of my work, so as sort of a background or a jumping off point. So I don't know how futuristic it is. I haven't quite yet started writing anything I would call futuristic. But I've seen that there's a lot of that happening within the continent right now.
Okay. You're the fourth Kenyan writer to win the Kane Prize for African Literature. Why do you think that is? And does it speak to the state of contemporary literature in Kenya?
That's a tough one. I wouldn't know why for Kenyans. I think, some countries are very heavily represented in the Kane Prize. So there's Nigeria, and then there's South Africa, and there's Kenya. And I think that has to do actually with our ability to actually get a lot more of our work posted in by our publishers for the Kane Prize. So that's a big problem that I would say that has been affecting the Kane Prize, because publishers are the ones supposed to actually submit the work. But if you don't have, say, a European publisher, then you probably would, your publisher may not be able to send an actual physical copy to London. So I think it's actually a question of over-representation, not so much a production. I'm worried about production in Kenya and among Kenyan writers. Actually, I don't think we're yet producing as much as Nigerians. You know, they're supremely overrepresented. You should say like 56% of submissions for yet another big prize on the continent, the Short Story Day Africa prize. 56% of that was Nigerians last year, and it's, you know, I was there being like, Kenyans, we're gonna defeat the Nigerians in this one, but yeah.
Okay, what prompted you to write Fanta Black Currant, which seems, I won't say a little gritty and harsh, it's very gritty and harsh.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the story a bit? What was it about the street children in Nairobi that grabbed your creative attention?
So I would say that Fanta Blackcurrant is actually a product of being in America at the time, because I wrote that in America and sort of looking back to home and starting to realize some things that had never occurred to me at all. So for example, growing up, it had never occurred to me that street children were actually children. That sort of separation between me, a child who has a family, and them, the others, existed very strongly. And so I'd say that Fanta Blackcurrant is in some ways sort of penance, sort of trying to show Kenyans that these children exist in the street and that they are children. And that's why, although the characters are, you know, teenagers, they do have a lot of childishness about them. Because as I went to school every morning, I went to school and I had to pass through the city, which is where I got a lot of contact with street children. And, you know, getting to watch them even from afar, you could see that, yeah, they were big-bodied, but they had a lot of that childishness in them that I wanted to really capture in my story, sort of as an indication to my country that something was terribly wrong there and we need to do something about it.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you about the use of indigenous language. You have a lot of Swahili words in there. I think most everybody could pick up on what Toto meant, but maybe not some of the other, like Muhindi Store and Muzungu. So what is it about injecting indigenous language or Swahili into your story? How does that...
I really wanted to capture how these children might speak. And again, I'm very focused on creating Kenyan stories that, in this case, Kenyans would appreciate. So a Kenyan reading that story would really go with it. But also that the outsiderness you may experience as a non-Kenyan is actually typical of what someone like me would feel reading work from here, for example. So that's actually, it's the other side of entering a space that is not your own. So I'm really very focused on trying to capture that language, because there is a big debate in Kenya right now about us writing in African languages. So that wouldn't even be Swahili. For me, it would be Meru. But that I also feel that, you know, those languages were not written to begin with. Writing them is something that's begun with British colonization, and that we are in the process in Kenya, in Nairobi, for example, of creating a whole new language, which is Sheng. Then there's debates of English, which is sort of another derivative of Swahili English. It's quite a bit of drama around that. But that the new culture, to me, is far more important than sort of trying to salvage a culture that is so distanced from me. You know, I grew up in Nairobi. I don't know anything about being Meru beyond sort of the experience of it through my own mother. So this story is part of one, I would say, taking back English, or taking up English as our language, as a language of the world, not of the people who colonized us. And on the other hand, also contributing towards the emergence of a whole new language that is more unifying than sort of where some of the older writers in Kenya would like us to go.
Okay, and when we look at the use of indigenous language, of course, we went more than 50 years back with Chinua Achebe, but also Ngugi wa Thiong'o
Yes.
was very instrumental. Is he somebody that you look to as an influence or a...
No, actually,
Mhm.
I would say that I do not agree with some of his ideas about language, especially because he's definitely he grew up in a whole different time. w- he's very attached to his African language, which is Kikuyu, and he has urged us as African writers to write in that language, but that doesn't seem relevant to me simply because I barely speak Meru, and I don't know anyone who reads it, so it doesn't make sense to me to actually go that far. And that's why I'm much more interested in supporting sort of the lingua franca that is emergent in the last 20 years. I think that's a more relevant mission for me to undertake than trying to make a language that was never written become sort of this global written language.
Okay. When I met you on Tuesday, I promised you I'd ask you this question. Please tell us about your very unique writing workshop in Nairobi and what makes it stand out from other writing workshops.
Okay, so I'll start with the second question. The reason it stands out from other writing workshops, it's because it's the only, say, university level writing workshop in Nairobi. So our universities do not actually teach creative writing. So if you want to go into sort of a 16-week program, you'd have to come to the Nairobi Fiction Writing Workshop. And I started it after the Kane Prize because that was a really good opportunity. Before, I was not like a well-known writer, and it's been an exciting experience for me because every sort of season or session of the workshop, I get to work with 10 to 14 writers on their writing, and what's exciting about that, again, it comes back to this feeling that I have that Kenyans are not producing enough creative writing. The workshop is actually, opening up space for writers to learn the kind of skills that I gained at Ames College and at NYU, and I believe that's gonna really push up our, production, and finally we're gonna be able to conquer the Nigerians. It's extremely important. There's so many.
There's heavy competition there.
Yes.
And my last question before we open it up to the audience, and how do you see the future for African and African diaspora writers? And what steps need to be taken to broaden the readership of African literature to the international community?
Exciting things are happening in that space for African and African American writers. Having someone like N.K. Jemisin win the Nebula 3 times for like her entire trilogy is such a great entrance, because that now you have sort of a new genre or within the fiction space coming up that was started by people like Octavia Butler, and that's very exciting to me. It just means that you can finally enter into that space with both legs. Then your other question was, sorry, I forgot.
What steps do you think it need to be taken to broaden the readership of African literature to the international community?
I think one of the things that needs to happen is that African writers need to stop being put in a different corner of bookstores in the UK and the US, which is what is really happening. It's exciting to see people like Tommy Adiemi being considered a bestseller and being read just across the board, but I think there's this sort of like separating us into a different space for marketing purposes or whatever, which means then our access to agents here is very limited, because they're like, oh, we can only take one African book this year to cover that quota. I think sort of being able to look at African writers and writers who are non-Western writers and sort of at the same plane would be one of the things that would start that, because there's some really exciting work coming out from just everywhere in the world.
Excellent. At this point, I want to open up the questions to the audience. I think somebody will bring you a mic if you have a question. Just raise your hand. You take mine. Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question about what it was like to go to the creative writing program at NYU and engage with young American writers, and how that might have influenced the workshop you're doing now in Nairobi, or if there's real differences that you can talk about between those two experiences.
I think the main difference between my creative writing, my MFO program, and my own workshop is that we read African novels in mine. But otherwise, I really follow a lot of the things that I learned here. I think the structure, or sort of the exploration of craft, is very important. I had a very stressful time at NYU. It's a great program. I was in class with some amazing people like Zadie Smith and Juno Diaz and David Lipsky. This was an amazing experience. And then I think I took it too early. If there are any writers out there who are thinking of going for the MFA, I would tell you, don't go into the MFA before you have like a complete manuscript, or of whether it's a novel or short stories, because what happens in the MFA is that you're editing, you're not writing. So if you start editing, then you start having this editing process. And I think I was telling you the other day that I actually quit writing for 5 years after I left my MFA, because it was just, I couldn't write a sentence without thinking about every word in it, and it just wasn't fun anymore.
Any other questions?
Hi, Makena.
Hello.
Because production has been a big thing that you've been talking about, what do you think can be done to increase production, and not just for Kenya, if you can think, continentally, originally?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand when it comes to Meru, I understand certain languages are more spoken than they are written. But how about Kiswahili as a written language of work?
I couldn't write in Swahili to save my life. Despite the fact that I studied it for 12 years, it's a really beautiful language when you see it written properly, and I'm not at that level. I've found that because I've spent most of my life speaking English and studying English, it's become the language that I can talk about having mastery in. So I've dedicated myself to sort of writing in that language and doing what Achebe talked about, which is breaking English to say the things that we wanna say. So that's my sort of decision that I've made around those languages.
Do we have any?
Production, what can be done around production? There's some amazing things that are already happening. SSDA, the Short Story Day Africa, for example, is going round and across just Africa, all the cities, they have sort of 1-day workshops going on. The Goethe Institute, the German Cultural Center, is doing that as well. The British Council used to be very big on sort of doing workshops and putting together writers from the UK and Kenya, for example. But I don't think they have that kind of program. The Americans are definitely not doing that. It should be useful, because honestly, I think the MFA program and sort of those kind of writing workshops are much bigger, more developed in America than they are anywhere else in the world. So that's something you could think into.
Hi, Makena. Thank you very much. My name is David Gashero. I'm the Deputy Chief of Mission, Kenyan Embassy. What I wanted to ask you is, how can we at the Kenyan Embassy help people, writers like you, to spread their wings, and also to link up with existing African writers here like Gogo wa Thiong'o, to try to showcase your work? Thank you.
I think I think it's the same thing. It would be wonderful to, well, I'd say that I don't know how much the American Embassy in Nairobi has been involved in helping festivals like the Story Moja Festival, which is where a lot of, African writers or Kenyan writers get to meet a lot of foreign writers. I mean, Yusuf he's a poet here. I can't really get his name right now. He's come to Nairobi also through the Story Moja Festival. So I think sort of supporting those kind of initiatives where you have American writers and American writers who are teachers coming into the country to give some sort of festival and participate in that kind of retreat would be quite helpful. Young people in Nairobi are really hungry to study writing. My workshop is actually a paid workshop, and people pay me about $250 for the program, which is 16 sessions, which is quite pricey, but people pay that. My class is always full, and I have people asking for more. So there is that hunger. It's just that we don't have that many programs of people doing that.
I'd like to thank the DCM for his question, which now has led me to want to be able to try to help facilitate some things with the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi. I don't know if you have any contacts there, but I will be flying out to Kenya in about a week or so.
Oh,
I'll
cool.
be at the embassy for some activities, and I know the head of the public affairs section. We have a cultural affairs section there too that is involved in these kinds of activities. And if you so desire, I would like to set up an opportunity for you to engage.
Awesome. I would love
Super.
that. Thank you.
Super.
On that note, talking about the embassy, I did want to add that the library has a Nairobi office located in the embassy.
Okay.
I'm quite sure there could be some good collaboration there to encourage Kenyan writing, to encourage East African writing. We have to beat West Africa.
Yes.
And I wanted to, in the last couple of minutes, I wanted to ask if there is any thing you would like to say as a closing statement before we end up. I do want to apologize to people for our lack of books. We really tried to get them here.
Yeah.
We tried to get them here,
I
but
know.
things just didn't come together. But I would encourage you to go on to Amazon, where you can probably get the book that includes Fanta Black Currant, as well as the other runners-up for the Kane Prize, and support African literature. So I'm going to let you have the last word.
I guess I'll say two things. One, the Kim Prize definitely needs more support. It's not as well funded as it used to be, and it's really been a great avenue for exposing African writers to the rest of the world. And two, thank you for having me, and thank you for listening to my story. I started reading it and I was like, wow, this is really depressing, and look at all these people just sitting here and taking it. I think I haven't done like read through the whole thing for a while, so I was like, oh my god. And last and third thing, this is not the only side of Nairobi that exists. It's just a small side, so don't be scared. You can please come visit us despite the travel advisories. We're pretty okay. Okay, no, I will not. Yeah. Well, okay.
Okay. I want to thank Makena and wish her the best in your time in the United States. I know that you will also be reading at the Lannan Center at Georgetown next Tuesday evening in connection with Africa Imagines, a day-long symposium, which will give people a lot of information about Africa, what's going on, not just the literature, and then we get to end up with some wonderful writers. Yourself, Makoma wa Ngugi, who we interviewed a few years back. And, please, I believe it's free and open to the public. And if you want to hear more from Makena, you will have that opportunity to do that at Georgetown next week on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you all for coming out today. I know we're competing with a beautiful day outside, so it's really great to see all of these people in here. And I want to thank Makena for coming all the way from Kenya and being very adventurous and getting to the Library of Congress today. We were a little worried, but she's here, and I really want to thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
thank the audience for coming.
Thank you.